NWPRCAR or make that donation at nwpr.org. Thanks so much. I'm Gigi Yellen. Thanks for inviting me and this music in to your afternoon.
It takes funding from a variety of sources to keep Northwest Public Radio on the air. Grants, financial contributions from listeners like you, and sponsorship from community partners, including Pullman Heating and Electric and Cowgirl Chocolates of Moscow. Learn more about our program sponsors and how you can join them by calling 800-842-8991 during business hours.
Mostly cloudy skies this afternoon with isolated rain or snow showers. Highs from the mid-30s to low 40s. Pullman and Moscow 35, 42 in Lewiston. The overnight lows in the middle 20s to lower 30s. You can look forward to a mostly sunny day tomorrow. Tuesday's high temperatures in the lower to middle 30s.
Northwest Public Radio really appreciates its partnerships with companies such as Fisher Systems and Whitman Hospital. They share our commitment to a world of ideas through their program sponsorships. You too can become a program sponsor. You'll find details at nwpr.org under Support and Business Support.
Northwest Public Radio, KRFA 91.7 Moscow, Pullman.
2 payrolls in November, and that was a total of $914,285. The contract payments was $25,297. Professional services was $73,845. $42,000 of noteworthy is the Northwest tank repair and some booster station repairs or design work. Sanitation was $265,309. Supplies, $35,256 or $526. I mean.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. Construction $17,379. The vehicles is the other noteworthy thing. Normally we buy these at the end of February, but dump trucks tend to be a special item. It takes a while to get them here, and so this is a carryover from last year into this year, and it was $140,934.
I saw a brand new one sitting out in the city shop last week.
Yeah, so that's that truck. Utilities $69,116. Equipment $18,246. Improvements $18,496, and insurance $4,689 for a total subtotal of $1,583,122, which represents 95% of the major categories that I just spoke to. Total expenditures for the month was $1,661,846.80, of which I mentioned earlier $914,000 of that was payroll. So if you have any questions, pass this on around.
I don't have any questions. Walter?
No.
Nothing here?
Walter?
Okay, I think we're good.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Okay, thank you, Don. Next agenda item presented by Alyssa Anderson, and this is Enviro issues as pertaining to the amended professional services contract.
Good afternoon.
Hi.
So I'll just do a little history on this item before I move forward with the request. It was back in 2010 when we received a Brownfields EPA assessment grant for $475,000. And within that grant, we prepared a work plan that was approved. And within that work plan, we had instructions to put out RFQs for environmental consultants and also public outreach consultants. And Enviro Issues was one of the ones that we contracted with to assist us in public outreach. And throughout the 5-year life of the grant, we haven't always needed their services, and so our original contract with them had expired. And now that we're approaching closeout at the end of next September, We'll need to start doing our follow-ups and all of the different accomplishments and outlining the beneficiaries and doing all the collateral portfolio information and pulling it into one piece to have available not only for our use and marketing what we've done with the funding, but also available for APA. And so it's a requirement under the grant to do this piece at the end of your grant. So today I have before you, it's called the Third Amended Professional Services Contract. And basically, under the original grant, we didn't have a dollar amount that we were allocating toward each contract or subcontract under these. We had a budget number of $40,000, and to this point we've spent about $31,000. We've been doing task orders for each line item of work that we've done. And so we've had one conference call with them to kind of outline the scope of this work. And we have $6,300 available in the budget. It doesn't mean that we'll spend all of that, but once this contract amendment is signed and I can move forward, then we'll start nailing everything down, and we'll have up to 5 conference calls with them putting the piece together. But we also are trying to get this taken care of ahead of time so that we can move forward and not be at the very end of the grant trying to finalize everything.
Art?
You think the 6,300 is going to be enough to cover it all?
Well, that's our budget parameter, and that's what we'll have left to work with.
So it will.
Huh?
So it will.
Yes, yeah, and I think it'll be plenty to cover
What
what
did
we
you
want
say
to
is
do.
left in it?
Excuse me?
How much is left in the grant?
For public outreach, there's 6,300.
Say again?
6,300.
Walter?
It is what it is.
It is what it is. Is there a limitation as to how many times we can apply for an extension, which is kind of what we're doing?
We've already received our final extension from
Oh, okay.
EPA that extended our contract with them through September 30th, 2016.
Okay.
Sounds like the numbers and the dates line up, and it's part of the requirement, so I think we should approve it.
We just put that on the consent agenda. Move that forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. You're going to stay here and visit with us again.
Yes.
Next one is the fiscal year 2017 cooperative agreement ADA ramps.
And I think Scott would join me for this item
Scott,
in case
you
you
wanna
guys
come up?
have any technical questions for him.
Looking for backup, Scott.
This is a program that we've been applying for. I think this is our fourth year. The state did a transition plan a few years back, and it identified all of the curb ramps on the state highway that needed replaced to meet the ADA requirements. And so each year they offer entities such as the City of Moscow up to $60,000 to repair and replace those ramps. And so they've all been identified based upon high, medium, and low needs. And so we've been going through each year and trying to do 5 or 6 of those. I think last year we were able to do more than that. So engineering identified these locations, and I'll let Scott kind of go over with you how they determined these priorities and what kind of construction we'll have within these ramps.
Yeah, typically every year we kind of try and find a corridor where we have high to medium needs for the various ramps. Those usually rank the highest, and things that'll definitely provide better access to various locations for the citizens. This year we identified along Washington at 6th Street, 7th Street, and 8th Street. Those various ones there on the east side where they're very difficult ones to bring into compliance. Typically every year we try and do around 10. This particular year,
Not me.
this particular year we're going to try and do about 6 of them just because of the difficulties with these ones. And with these ones too, we'll have to build these ones more as the curb extensions, kind of like what you see out there in front of, like on Jackson Street, in front of EMSI over there, to actually meet compliance. But
So you are including curb extension?
Yeah, this will have curb extensions,
all-
some
at
minor
all of
utility
them?
adjustments.
At all of them?
Pretty much all of them. The only one that won't is the one down there on the southeast corner of Gritman Medical Center.
So is this kind of a function of the hill and the narrowness of the sidewalks?
Yeah, once you come down the street grade, it's kind of difficult. You kind of have to extend it out to actually meet the compliance for the grades.
Okay.
And this is a program actually where we're being paid to do the state's work for them.
Yeah.
So, and we'll continue to, I think they'll continue to sponsor the program until everything's taken care of. And I think there's like another 20 or so that are.
Yeah, there's just for ITDs for the project they have coming up in a couple of years. They want us to do another 20 on that particular route for them, for both Highway 8 and 95.
Well, it's good for the city, I think. It's good for the city, good for the people who need those ramps, and we're paying the vast share of it except our in-kind match.
Well, helps us become ADA compliant, which we
Yes.
have to do. This is just a continued extension of what we've been doing, so.
Correct, yes.
Yeah, it's a no-brainer to me. Do you have anything, Walter?
At 8th Street, there is, and I know the two are not required, but are interrelated. At 8th Street, the southeast corner has a marked head crossing over to Gritman. But you're doing the northeast.
We're doing the northeast corner there, yes.
Is the southeast ADA compliant already?
I can't recall where it ranked among the
Is
rankings
it
there.
compliant already?
I don't know. I'd have to take a look. It would have been one that we would have picked if it was not, or if it would have been ranked high.
Yeah, and I didn't catch this, and I drove by it this afternoon and didn't look because I didn't catch this. So, but you're doing the north side of 8th, which is not the marked crossing, and doing the west side by Gritman that corresponds with it.
Yes. We're doing the west one that is corresponding to the southeast part of the intersection, because those two on ITD's list rank high as being non-compliant.
Now, say it one more time. You're doing the west one that corresponds with.
We're doing the west one that corresponds with the southeast side of 8th. So the one that's on this, better if I just show you a diagram.
That's the west one that corresponds to the southeast side. I'm having a hard time on that one, too, Walter.
This says you're doing the northwest one.
Do that one. You're going to do that one. Oh, all right, so that's... This has been done. That's been done.
Looks like it.
That's been done.
Okay.
So that pretty well cleans that intersection up then. That's just kind of the finishing for it.
Yeah,
Okay. Well, a picture's worth a lot of words, isn't it?
yes.
I will also note that we have a resolution that goes with this agreement also, and I can't recall if there's a resolution, if it has to go on the full agenda, or if it can go on consent.
I think there is.
Sounds fine.
Okay.
Is that part of it? Okay, so that's not described in the text then. It's okay, but I'm just trying to figure out what we're doing.
No, that is part of the
Yeah.
grant.
Down by the emergency entrance. Okay.
That's on ITD system.
Okay, that's fine. I just,
Sure.
I don't think it's described in the text.
So we're good with it?
I'm good.
Let's put that on the regular agenda, please.
Regular?
Yeah, I think it's these types of things, I think it's really good that we have, it gets out publicly so people understand that what we're doing towards ADA compliancy and that we're utilizing our tax dollars in a very efficient and positive manner, so.
Scott, would you bring overheads for the council meeting for that, please? So we can,
Especially that one you just showed us.
so we can point and tell?
Yeah, I'll create them for you.
That'd be good.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Les McDonald, City Limits Acknowledgement, 2016. sounds to me like it's more a matter of, yep, that's what they are. They still are.
That's it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, pretty much. It's a process we have to go through each year. So if we have in some way modified our city limits, boundaries, or corporate limits, then we need to declare what those new limits are at the beginning of each year. In the case of 2015, as was the case in 2014, we have not done any annexations, and so nothing has changed since we last approved a legal description for our corporate limits back in 2013. So a simple acknowledgement that it's unchanged and we're continuing with the previous is all we need.
Okay, so this is just a matter of routine, so that we can move that forward, and that can go on the consent agenda.
You haven't given me a chance.
Did you want to say something? Did you want to change the city limits?
I think that we should, I just can't help myself. Les,
I know,
would you mind reading the meets and bounds to us?
Can I do that? Okay. We got enough time?
Walter.
Who in the department had to read this at some point in the past?
Actually, Ron.
And follow it around and assure you that it does work.
For the last 15, 18 years, Ron Crumley did that for us.
Would you tell him that I hope he hasn't gone blind yet?
Well, he retired on us this year, so it's going to be a little challenging to be able to convey that. But it is a question as we move into this next year. We are anticipating a possible annexation in 16, so we're just discussing that today about how we'll address that.
Is there any way to do this without someone sitting down and reading it and following it around? Have they gotten it automated now where you don't have to do it that way?
To a certain extent, you can make sure closure happens within like an AutoCAD program because you do meets and bounds within that and all of that. But it really does need to be followed.
But to write it out like this requires writing it out like this.
Yes.
That's part of the requirement.
Well, that's the way legal descriptions are done and have been.
Can't you just say refer to last year?
This year we can, yes. So here it is.
What you doing?
That's what he's doing unless somebody dropped a page. Okay.
Okay.
Thank
Gotta
you.
love government. Thank you. Consent agenda.
Copy and paste, yes.
Gotta love service.
Consent.
Okay, what's the next one? We got Dwight Curtis with the City of Moscow Facilities Master Plan, 2015. You have a minute and 45 seconds to present that, Dwight.
I can do that.
Now it's a minute and a half.
Okay, do you have any other questions of me? How was that?
You have a copy of the amended plan. I understand the one that we saw in the workshop has had some minor changes to it.
Very minor,
Do we have extras?
Yeah.
yes. Yeah, we distributed that.
Go ahead with what you want to do.
Okay.
This is the updated one.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, thank you. As you know, we've been working on this facilities master plan for some time. We had a workshop back in September. And so this has those few updates, and but the majority of this, almost all of it, is as it was. The project background, between 1990 and 2013, the population increased from 19,000 to 24, almost 25,000, basically 28-29%. The incorporated areas increased from 5.33 to 6.92 square miles. Expecting the growth to continue. Continued increase in government services. Continued aging of facilities and overcrowding, and deterioration of the facilities. And we also would expect that as time goes, that the situation would become more acute. And this master plan was developed to contend with those issues and hopefully solve its current and future facility needs. The goals: to validate and update and integrate the selected findings, account for our growth, and estimate our current and future building and site area needs. The document is to aid in developing a budget and scheduling for all of this, and to assure any future projects are planned in conjunction with and support of 20 years of a facilities vision and master plan. The intent is to provide an analysis of all our facilities and which ones we should retain and dispose of. Of course, facility retainage, identify how long and what's the highest and best use of those. Also to forecast our growth, our staff growth, and document our current and facility, our future needs, and sequencing of the new facilities development and rearrangement, renovation of existing facilities, and disposal of those that we deem no longer needed or not cost effective to retain. Okay, like anything of this nature, we have caveats, and of course the first one is this thing took almost 3 years to develop. A lot of things have changed, not to mention we had different staff working on it, authors, and also the consultants working with the staff back and forth. But through all of that, we do not believe there's anything in here that any changes that would have come up that would invalidate any of the findings. Could be some confusion regarding the full-time employees. For some, space is space regardless of whether you're a part-timer or a full-timer, so you have to include those numbers in your FTEs to determine your space needs. And also, this document is based on needs, so it's understood that the realities, funding can change. Different things can change as time goes as to whether or not these things would be implemented. So just to keep those in mind as you go through all of this. There's a lot to digest, but in the end, it comes down to actually, other than money, some pretty simple conclusions. The project team was LCA Architects and DSA Incorporated, and out of Boise, and of course some elected officials and city staff. The scope of the project included analyzing our organization, staffing forecasts, determining our departmental space needs, reviewing our existing facilities, and preparing a conceptual facility plan, and also prepare cost budgets for options. And nothing here that you don't already know, but this is just a map of where the different facilities are around town. The staffing trends and forecast, as you can see by the orange line going through it, that the FTEs are going to continue to go up, increase, as well as the population. And you can see at the top of the chart, and this is in your book, you can see everything just continues to grow, and it stays pretty much the same as far as the increases from year to year, and we have it in 5-year increments. And I won't go through this entire page. This is in your document, but it's interesting to see as the years go by department and by division where we expected increases to take place and how much through time. And of course this goes through 2033. Of our building inventories, we had 18 enclosed structures and 142 318 gross square feet, and you can see how it's broken down. And these particular charts show the use and non-use occupiable spaces within each.
Just a quick question.
Yes, sir.
Go back to that last slide, if you would, Glenn. Parks and Rec 25,600, it says buildings by square foot. The question I'd have would be the Hamilton Lowell Aquatic Center. That would not just be the building part, but that would include everything, wouldn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Not just necessarily the building.
On that facility, yes.
On that facility, yeah, okay.
You can see City Hall, the Magyar Building, Police Building, and the Mann Building, the percentages of the facility that are actually usable, and the other part that is non-occupiable.
In City Hall and the others, how are you defining usable and not usable? Because would this room be usable, or the hallway outside?
The hallway would not be, bathrooms, things like that.
Basement's probably not counted.
In this case, it's not, correct. That's why you see a huge amount in City Hall. Plus, we have lots of hallways. And this gross ratio, you'll see that later on, and that's where that is calculated into the equation. So we have the total building space needs, and it goes across to 2013 or 2033. I'm sorry, and you see where you can see the deficits based on our current inventories as compared to where we should be, based on the findings of the consultants. And NUSF, you can see up there, that's net usable square feet. And this here is the square footage needs by function. And this is general government, recreational and building and grounds, public works, and public safety. You can see public safety and public works are the ones that increase the most over time. Parks and grounds and general government, it increases some, but it's relatively stable. Okay.
So I would ask this question while you have that slide up. Seems like we're doing a pretty good job with what we have. Why do we need more?
As we had at the very beginning, that the services are going to continue, the expectation of the services will continue to increase.
I don't mean in the future. I mean, even right now, we're not anywhere close to where we should be. We're 6,000 square feet short on general government.
17.
Public Works is really short, but like I said, we seem to be doing pretty well with what we have.
I can't answer that question for you.
So the question then, boys, is by saying we need this much more square footage, is this then a best case scenario? Or as our good friend John Weber would say, is that developing a Cadillac where we need to be able to utilize a Chevrolet and a Ford?
This was based on what we believe that will be needed.
How long? You've been in politics a while, haven't you, Dwight?
Is it based on those ratios that we saw in one of the previous slides? Where we got like 69% usable and it should be 70 to 80 or something like that?
No, I wouldn't think so. This is actually just based on what the usable space is right now compared to what is believed that would be needed to do the job as time goes. So it doesn't include the non-usable space. It includes the space that we have and what we need in addition to that that's usable, occupiable.
And if I may, Wayne, some of the issues are also addressed in the strategic plan, especially in regards to public safety, which builds on this. As you know, a lot of our plans feed the strategic plan, so you can see the additional safety concerns or things that maybe weren't considered specifically in the facilities plans outside of space. So I think they complement each other well, but help give us a better idea of where we're at and where we'd like to be or where we need to be. So.
Understand that my comments do not necessarily reflect my opinion. I'm simply playing devil's advocate.
Understood. Of course, this is just another chart showing what the deficiencies would be and how much the change would be in 2033 based on where we are now and what the needs are and what the deficiencies would be. You see, if you were to be to where you needed to be in 2013, it would be 100 for the executive branch would be 125% change
From now.
from now.
Dwight, it shows a 34.7% population increase by 2033. I haven't looked at every one of these, but a lot of them are a lot more than that. I mean, I hear this discussion of services, yet the population's not growing.
I'm not sure what you want me to answer with that.
Yeah, put that into a question.
Where's Gary?
I don't know that either. It's tied up.
And I think the balance is we've seen the 1%.
You see what I'm getting at, though?
I think.
Wayne started, I think, a little bit with you've got this huge percent growth needed in facilities.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking 2033. It's a 35% population increase shown.
Well, and if I remember correctly, the balance also included not necessarily in doing new services, but providing the same services to 30% more of the population as it grows over the next 30 years, assuming that 1%-ish growth rate per year. And so I think it was a combination or a balance of the two that we were trying to capture, but also tried to be conservative about that number as well, while also being realistic. But I don't know if I'm understanding your question correctly.
It just looks like some huge facility size increases.
Well, and I think that philosophically we have to look at, over the last 20 years, what have we been required to do as far as additional services? 20 years ago, the city of Moscow didn't deliver near the service that it does now in a variety of different areas. We have to anticipate that by 2033, there'll be that much incremental increase in other services. Who knows what they might be? So the increase in services will probably outpace the increase in population.
And also, I think this includes the fact that we're starting from a bit of a deficit already.
Starting with a deficit. And you can go to, Les can answer this a lot better than I can, but you go down to the shop, for example, and they're tripping over each other. Just the facilities, the way that they're designed, just aren't meant for what we have now. You go to the man building, and they're stacked on top of each other there. And so just to bring you up to where you ought to be, and then go forward to where you would be in 2033, this was the projection.
That's just what I was going to say. Actually, just to help clarify a little bit, at least from the Public Works side, part of why you see those numbers is that very reason. The man building, for instance, the break room is the conference room. And so they conflict with each other a lot of the time. And so the usability of the space is limited. In the city shop where the fleet operations are, there's kind of 2.5 bays. None of them are drive-through. Equipment's gotten bigger. There's more equipment. The number of spaces has not increased. And so if you have some piece of equipment that's in there for long-term repair, it takes a bay completely out of operation, so you lose a substantial capacity of our fleet repair operations. So those are the types of deficiencies that you'll see that assessment of where we are today versus really where we need to be, and the large jump that would occur with that. And then beyond that would be the growth, the roughly 1% a year in population, the infrastructure that comes with that, the services to the population that we currently provide that would be added to just in sheer volume, and then potentially other services that would come along with that, such as a stormwater program in Public Works. That'll be a new division, new staff, new equipment, mandated eventually through the EPA and those types of things. So those kind of considerations are taken into account when projecting what the needs are, and I can tell you they were actually scaled back from where we started to get to the numbers you're seeing today, to what we think is reasonable for the city to be able to address financially, space-wise, and what we're just capable of in our situation. So it's a combination of all those things that results in the kind of numbers that you're seeing.
I wonder how many years we would have to go back if you could ever get to a point to where our facilities match the services and population.
1940.
I don't know that we could ever get to that point.
I throw out 1940 because that's generally when our shop facilities were constructed, and I would guess they were probably adequate at that time.
You go back in the 1970s when our police department was at best 2/3 the size of what it is now in number of officers and staff, and they were bursting at the seams then in the current facility that they were using, which is smaller than the one they are in now.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, and this one is a departmental adjacency matrix. A lot of different ways that this could have been done, but and this can change as time goes and needs. But it was just to give a general idea of which departments had more frequency and need to be with other departments through their business. So that also works with your locations of your different facilities. Some of the initial early arguments to this is that as time goes, other than when it's physically necessary, that a lot of the computerized or automated systems negate the need for the close proximity, because you can do a lot of it online now. But you still need the physical touch on a lot of these.
So do white boxes mean there doesn't need to be a relationship at all?
Sometimes, I don't know if they're including some in the others or there wasn't any at all. Yes. And this one was an interesting challenge. I mean, just about anybody you talked to had a different opinion on where it should go. This gets you fairly close, and as time goes, this can change as well. The inventory considerations, police station, you have your pros and your cons. Same with the city hall and the city shops. On the police station, of course, the location owned by the city, these are the pros. Can be more efficiently redeveloped and opportunity for swing space. The cons, limited parking, aged infrastructure, no expansion options, may be better suited to commercial activities and inefficient layout. City Hall, it's a historic building, proximity to downtown, it's easy to get to. Space utilization can be enhanced. As you know, we're remodeling third floor right now to take advantage of that. Substantial site for an annex and established downtown location. And of course, the cons, limited parking, aged infrastructure, expensive remodeling, displacements during construction, and code compliance issues, and a poor net gross ratio. City shops, we've already talked about that. Then you have the man building. Of course, it's pros to that. It's downtown, proximity to City Hall. It's established location and substantial site for an annex. The cons, limited parking, aged infrastructure, expensive remodeling, and displacement during construction. And Magyar, of course, we just leased that, but pros to that, it's adjacent to the water. And, of course, we have the water department at the Magyar. It's proximity to downtown, and it's ideal for commercial use. And the cons, it's poor interior utilization, limited expansion options, aged infrastructure, does not need to have significant visibility, location adjacent to current wellheads. That was a question during the workshop as to why that's a con, and the reason was because if you did want to expand the building, now you've got wellheads that are in the way. It's just a limitation. Minimal parking, and it's a poor net to gross ratio. The proposed solution and phasing plan. The first was construct a new police facility. The location still to be determined, and vacate the existing police station. Second, build a new office annex at the city shops, and we have two options for that. That would have maintenance, streets, engineering, water, and abandon the Magyar. Construct a new office building at the man site, and that would still have community development and engineering, and remodel City Hall basement. Actually, remodel City Hall. We're already doing that on third floor, but that also included the basement. For the first option of the annex down at the shop, it's basically add the annex to that and keep the existing facility. The existing facility, of course, is right here. And add the new facility shop over here, an annex. And then option B is to basically start from scratch and build out here, eliminate this, utilize that yard space for other things. We'll have the estimated construction costs on these a little bit later. At the man building, this would basically be a 2-floor building, and each floor being 13,034 square feet. There's been some discussion that maybe that's overkill. The second floor was planned as a shelled space. You always need more, so that's what that was for. And plus the size of each floor, square footage wise, could probably be reduced. As we were looking at this earlier, if you actually put the square footage down in real square footage on that map, it comes out here and uses up pretty much that whole parking area. So that could be scaled back.
So that's not a 13,000 square foot footprint.
Well, I don't think so. I think it's a little smaller. It should be about here. And I mean, you can see the total, it's about 17. Yeah, it should be about 17. That does not include, or that, Bill might have to help me out, I can't remember, but the grossing factor was not included in the total here. It should be about 17. So, or 16,
well
16,
over
something.
half parking.
Yeah. But we still think that's overkill, so when we would get to this point, we would relook at those numbers.
This current building, well, maybe Les knows this current building, is it capable of supporting a second floor?
The man building.
The man building.
The man building, of course, currently is a 2-story in that it does have a basement that is partially above grade at the south end because there's a kind of a split entry stairwell if you go in that southwest corner. But yeah, structurally, with the condition of the walls on that building,
You couldn't put a second floor, another floor.
Wasn't ever intended to take it.
I don't believe so. And looking at the condition of that, it's a CMU building and has a lot of fractures within it. I don't believe you could ever place another structure on top of that existing wall system.
So this plan is for a new building.
Knock it down, start
How many
over.
square feet is the current man building
I think it's roughly 4,000, maybe slightly more than that,
on each floor?
total.
On each or both?
Total.
Total. So it's a 2,000-foot footprint?
I believe that's correct.
Oh, it's bigger than that. Really?
Mm-hmm.
Then this isn't correct.
Well, that is small.
Yeah, this drawing is inaccurate, I'm afraid.
So this needs to be corrected in the document.
Probably would be helpful
Because
to
if
get
you
it
talk about
corrected,
it
yes.
today
Mhm.
and you don't correct it, you've got to presume that this is going to get addressed within the next 10 years, while all of y'all are still around here, remember this isn't right.
Right. Yeah, I would suggest that would be a good thing to do.
Yeah.
And so we could adjust the drawing and see make sure the numbers are accurate or if they need to be modified slightly. But yeah, I think that would be a good approach.
Yeah. Talking about building 3 times the size of what you have now.
Well, what we have is drastically undersized, as we
Yeah.
talked about before. But yeah, this as Dwight said, does include a shell space on a second upper floor. And so it's more than perhaps what we would need for community development and engineering. And so,
So I know, but like
yeah.
Walter, I'm trying to visually picture it sitting in that space, and if you're saying that the above-ground level that we're looking at is only 2,000 square feet, and that's 13,000?
Yeah, we ran this
On one
earlier,
level?
and it comes out to about here.
Yeah, roughly out into the end of those parking stalls, and I think even a little bit down to the west to get that 13,000 square foot footprint. So yes, the drawing is inaccurate and probably needs to be addressed.
13,000, that's over 6 times bigger than that footprint that it is now. That's coming out further than what you're saying. That's going to take up almost the whole entire parking lot.
I haven't actually run the drawing on it, so I can't say for sure. But that's what I'm
Walter's
told.
correct. We need to look at that.
I don't think it's nearly
that's
as bad as what you're thinking. It's about
comes
to
Bill.
here.
Yeah, Bill. I think
So,
Bill has run this one,
yeah.
so he can tell you.
Yeah, we were just going over this just earlier.
And actually, if you look at the building, total square footage gross is shown as 34,000 square feet. So you're talking 17,000 square feet per floor for the building footprint. That comes down to about the driveway here out to a point about all the way up to the corner. So it occupies a large footprint on the property.
So the question I've got is that the plan we want to adopt?
The identified need in the 2 departments projected out to 2033 is 8,034 square feet.
So why are we talking 33,000 square feet?
Well, they added the second floor. There was 5,000 additional feet added to what Bill just said for storage, and we believe that included taking over the storage, document storage that we have in the basement here. And so they added a second floor, which is the same square footage, and for shelf space for the future.
The numbers still don't work.
Well, probably something more in the range of the 13,000 square foot number that you see in the column at the middle bottom of the page, in a 2-story configuration, if you're going to use all the space. So you'd be roughly
6,500 per floor.
7,000 per floor, roughly,
Okay.
which would bring, obviously the scale of that down considerably.
I'd suggest that before council holds their hands up and say adopted, we get it corrected to what it is.
Let's get this clarified.
To what you're trying to tell
Yeah.
us that we're supposed to be adopting. I mean, I don't think you can get any argument out of us that what you've got to work with now within the man building is not good. It's very far from optimum, but,
Yeah.
and whether or not we want to quibble about the numbers as to what's needed, just put that aside, it doesn't look like the picture,
Right. We need to correct that.
or vice versa. The picture doesn't look like what we're being told.
And providing they're not gone for the holidays, we should be able to have this done in time for Monday's meeting, easy enough.
For when?
Monday?
21st.
Yeah, okay.
In, if I may,
Yes.
in that vein, I've got something that I was assured was going to be changed in this version, but hasn't been, regarding City Hall, the building itself.
Thanks, Bill.
On section 4, page 1, Dwight, way back up to the front. When I read this for the workshop, and I got very confused about what it was saying, or what I thought it was saying wasn't what it was saying. Phase 4 says remodel the existing city hall to meet requirements of admin, finance, executive, IS, and HR. That's not what this document's saying we should do. It's saying remodel the basement. The way it's written, now bear with me, is that you're going to remodel City Hall. That's different in my mind to remodel City Hall basement.
They fill into the
Y'all-
caveats.
You're doing some remodeling now upstairs. It's not contemplated in this. It's stuff that needs to be done to make things work better up there. But when you talk about this plan doesn't include what's being done upstairs now, and it only addresses the basement. So I think the terminology in Phase 4 on Section 4, Page 1, should be corrected to reflect that we're talking about the basement of City Hall.
Okay.
If you go over to Section 4, Page 5, there's the same graphic that was in the original workshop deck that had me confused as to what we were proposing to do. It says existing City Hall proposed uses. That's not correct. 3 of the pictures are existing City Hall, and 1 of them is proposed uses. So that page needs to be cleaned up in the way it's laid out on the page. The first floor, second floor, and third floor, to my understanding, Jen and Dwight, is existing City Hall with no proposed changes in this document. The basement shown on this page is the proposed work at City Hall and a possible way to renovate that for IS and HR. And my belief is that the other items listed on the previous page I was talking about, administration, finance, and executive, remain the same. They're not part of the changes proposed for this building.
Yeah.
And I think those pages need to be cleaned up to reflect it. Because, again, this is a document that isn't going to get accomplished tomorrow, next week, next year, or probably the bulk of it in the next 5 or 10 years. It's going to be picked up by your successors somewhere down the road, and if they're going to use it at all, they need to be able to understand what you were trying to tell them.
Yeah, I agree. The accuracy in this is really important to get this accuracy right, because we know I won't be here. He probably won't be here. Art's crazy if he's still here. So, and I see a whole bunch of people out here going to be retired probably before a lot of this happens. So, it's going to be like, where's Catherine? Is she still going to be here?
It's very hard, and I think Les will agree with me, and Bill probably. When you come along 10, 12, 15 years down the road, and you're pulling documents off the file, out of the files and off the shelves, and you're trying to divine what were they trying to do, it can get really hard even at best.
Sure.
If you start out with it not known not to be correct, they're not going to get any value out of it.
Sure.
This
document.
Well, the basement.
The basement. This gives away that in 2015, the staff and consultant at that time had an idea of what might be done with the basement, and the $710,000 price tag stopped us from doing it.
Yeah. It's a living document.
But if we pick it up in
change.
15 years, having found the money, or the pressure gets such we've got to do something and utilize the basement of City Hall, we've got a starting point.
Okay, point well taken. Right?
We'll fix the
While
slide
they're doing
here,
this
too.
one, 1, 2, 3, 4 don't seem to correspond to anything. The 1, 2, 3, 4 on the yellow, they don't correspond to anything on the
I
left
think you
side.
pointed that out at the workshop.
I did. What do those 1, 2, 3, 4s in yellow mean?
Yeah, well, good question. I think that was taken off of a different document, just a copy paste, and that just.
Don't do that.
Well, I didn't do that. We paid $35,000 for someone else to do that.
Yeah, so anyway,
We can fix that.
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. If you can get it by Monday.
No problem.
He may not be done with his presentation yet.
Yeah, I'm
No,
not
he's
done.
not.
But close, getting close.
We'll find more.
Okay, and then at the end, you have your construct your new facility. These are the actual proposals. Construct a new police facility. The estimate was $4.8 million. You have the 2 options for the city shop. The one with the just expansion of what we have was a little over $7 million. Starting from scratch was just over $10 million. The third is construct a city hall office building, the man building, $5.7 million, and remodeling the existing city hall basement at $710,000. So depending on which option that you would go with on the shop, you have 18.4 million or 21.3 million, and of course these are
And
estimates
that's in today's
based on what we
dollars.
have.
Yep.
And with that, I am done. Any more questions? These would be easy changes, easy fixes.
Okay, this committee won't make a recommendation right now because of the changes that are needed, but we would like to see that at Monday's council, for full council discussion.
Dwight, can you back up one slide, please? Check the math. That's all I've got.
Any particular one, or?
Got the totals.
Okay. Okay.
Okay?
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's your marching orders, right?
Got him.
Yep. Okay, last item on the agenda is Becky Couch is going to be presenting the analysis of the impediments to fair housing and fair housing action plan presentation. Also joining us is Randy.
Randy Bokal, yes.
Nice to have you, Randy.
Well, thank you for having us. And Becky is going to lead us through the slides on this presentation, but the impediments to fair housing report is something that we're kind of committed and obligated to do on a 10-year cycle. And
Randy, let me interrupt you to say that there's about 20,000 people watching television, and you right now, and they have no idea why you're sitting there. What's your rank?
Okay, I thank you very much. I am the new chair of the Fair and Affordable Housing Commission. I succeeded Jill Maxwell. Jill is still on the commission and a very valuable member of the commission. So I'm getting my feet wet and thoroughly enjoying it.
Okay, thank you.
Just a very valuable tool that we have learned a lot of things about. It was kind of a small response, and I think that according to the terms of the people that actually did the study, it's not a statistically valid report. However, it does provide us with some information that is very useful, and we can put to good use and good practical purposes. So, Becky, why don't you go ahead and...
All right. Okay, so like you said, we've got the draft analysis of impediments to fair housing and fair housing action plan for your review. So the purpose of this analysis was essentially to document Moscow's efforts for promoting fair housing in our community. And the document is twofold. It provides first an analysis of the community's housing practices, policies, procedures, and plans for both the public and private sector, and the process that we went through to review those things to identify any existing impediments to fair housing. And then second is the documentation of action items that the Commission came up with to address any of those identified impediments. And then in addition, the document fulfills the requirements of the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, also known as HUD. HUD requires the grantees of the Community Development Block Grant Program to certify that they will affirmatively promote fair housing by preparing an analysis of impediments to fair housing choice, implement actions, and then maintain records of relevant actions taken. The CDBG program works to ensure decent, affordable housing, provides services to the most vulnerable in our communities, and creates jobs through expansion and retention of businesses. So that being said, Moscow is not an entitlement city for CDBG funds due to our population, which is less than 50,000. However, we can be a recipient for state-administered CDBG funds, and this document assists Moscow in potentially being a good candidate for those funds. And then, as I said, it just publishes our efforts to promote fair housing, and it provides an action item list for the Fair and Affordable Housing Commission. So just a little bit of background. The City Council established the Fair Housing Commission in 1998 and empowered them to review the city's analysis of impediments to fair housing and action plan on an annual basis and make recommendations to the council for amendments or changes to the plan. Here's our current makeup of the commission and the individuals that were involved in this process. And we will be losing one of those, so we will actually have 4 vacancies going into the new year. The first City of Moscow analysis of impediments and action plan was adopted in 2003, and then they had an addendum that was adopted in 2005. So the plan has not been updated for 10 years. The work began on this updated plan in 2013, and some of the work that we've done includes we contracted with the U of I Geography Department to conduct a mailed survey, which is the bulk of our work, was conducting that and reviewing those results. That allowed us to identify any impediments within the private sector. And then there were 3 different events that the Commission worked to co-sponsor, being a social justice forum with the Human Rights Commission, fair housing training with the Intermountain Fair Housing Council, and co-sponsoring tenant landlord workshops with ASUI on campus. So through those 3 different events, the Commission was able to hear from community members any issues or concerns related to the provision of fair housing in our community, and learn about any training needs or just concerns of members. And then finally, the Commission reviewed city codes, policies, and plans to see if there was any existing impediments within those documents. Just a summary of the survey. The UI Geography Department prepared a demographic profile of Moscow's population, and that resulted in an address list of 400 households to be surveyed. And that was conducted in March of 2014. So we mailed 400 surveys, and we had 87 of those completed and returned, which was a decent response rate of 22%. And then we chose to send a email to students, and we were given a list from the U of I of 1,995 student emails, and only 68 online surveys were completed, which was just a 3% response rate. So overall, the response rate comes out to be 6%, which, as Randy said, is not very valid statistically. So due to the the respondents, there was very little diversity among the respondents in terms of race, nationality, and sexual orientation, which is kind of consistent with Moscow not being heavily diverse in those areas. And then the survey did include demographic questions, income questions, household and familial status, and collected data on renters versus homeowners and students separately. And then respondents ranked factors that limited their choice and influence, and things that influenced their choice of housing in Moscow. So no major impediments or forms of discrimination as prohibited by the Fair Housing Act were made apparent from the survey results. However, there was a perception of housing discrimination among respondents who have never personally felt discriminated against. And so 21% of the respondents, and the number of respondents came out to be 155. 21% of those indicated that they think there's a housing discrimination issue in Moscow. However, when asked if they have personally felt discriminated against, they answered no. And then there's also a perceived income discrimination, with income being the most significant limiting factor for the choice of housing. And it also was apparent that there's the rent-to-income ratio reaches housing cost burdens, and that's as defined by HUD, for 55% of the responding renters. Having said that, the low response rate and then also the lack of diversity among the respondents, it doesn't allow for very many strong conclusions regarding the presence of discrimination, housing discrimination, or the housing cost burden levels reaching those levels. So it's, the results weren't statistically that valid, but we did learn some things and show you what our action items we came up with. We came up with 6 action items that make up the action plan. The actions either address existing impediments to fair housing that were identified, or they encourage the provision and maintenance of affordable housing in the community. And the goal is for the Commission to address each of the items within the next 3 years. So action item number 1 came from the
excuse me, the phrasing or the wording is a little confusing. You're going to address all of the action items within 3 years.
Right, all 6.
Okay.
So the first one came from the comprehensive plan, and the action is to research and develop appropriate programs and partnership opportunities that will assist in the provision of affordable housing as suggested in the comp plan. So there were a number of programs and potential partnerships outlined within the comp plan that the Commission could do some research on and maybe recommend development of those programs. That would include some enforcement policies to maintain affordable housing when a property is sold, programs to fund construction and rehabilitation of affordable housing units, third-party arrangements including deed restriction and land trusts to reduce the purchase price of home ownership. And then the research should advise on the potential level of success in Moscow and also look at other municipalities.
Question. As we have it in our packet under action item number 1, and it's your bullet number 1. Programs may include enforcement policies to ensure resale of affordable housing properties below market values or below market rates. Define that. You can define that as I think it is.
Well, we might take example of the Moscow Affordable Housing Trust Program, where they have just completed the rehabilitation and the resale of a house. So in the future, when that house gets resold, it would be taken into consideration that there were special funding options available for them to purchase this house. So they wouldn't be able to capitalize on the additional appreciation of property values.
So then, when somebody buys a property like this, my assumption is that there's a disclosure policy set in the signing documents that would tell them that that actually would happen.
That's correct. Mm-hmm.
But that's not true with the one that just sold out at Eastman Acres, is it?
Eastman Acres?
Well, this is the first time it has been sold. This is the first time that has transacted within this housing trust arrangement.
But there's no limitation in the current, in the new deed, is there?
I would have to ask Niels Peterson that particular question. I believe it.
I don't believe there is.
Oh, okay.
I don't believe they do. And maybe where Wayne was coming from, if I may, is the enforcement policies part of that bullet.
Mm.
I mean,
how do you enforce that?
Well, are you going, can the council expect in the future the commission to come to us and request that we create an ordinance that would carry out bullet 2?
Well, part of that is still going to be in the conversation phase of what we're taking on here in the coming.
I mean, I understand the laudability of the item.
Mm-hmm.
I may be, I don't speak for Wayne, but it may be a little bit like Wayne in terms of how do you enforce and would we want to enforce? We want to put that burden. It's one thing, I guess if somebody agrees to buy a house and agrees that they will not resell it for greater than what they paid for it and the appreciation just happens.
Well, right, and it wouldn't be to sell it for no more than they paid for it, but it would be if they had a $10,000 benefit up front, they wouldn't be able to capitalize on that $10,000 benefit at the back end of it.
Yeah, and this is probably more detailed than we need to get into today, but just some council member thoughts on.
Well, it just seems complicated to me because, first of all, before that can even happen, you're going to have to sit down with Rod Hall and have some very in-depth discussions as to the legality of the city even having an ordinance that dictates what somebody can sell their house for. So this has to be, to me, this has to be enforceable through the covenants and through the documentation when Fair and Affordable Housing sells property or sells a home to somebody. And all this is already spelled out, and then you have to figure out some way on your own to enforce that. I don't see the city trying to enforce that.
Agreed to by the buyer.
Yeah.
And if I might clarify, it's a pretty common practice or method when you're looking at land trust models that there is a deed restriction, because oftentimes the land is either donated or there's another subsidy that comes in from a public agency, and in order to ensure that that unit remains affordable over time, there's a deed restriction and a resale formula that restricts that future sale to ensure that unit retains affordability in perpetuity. That's not going to be the role of the commission itself. Is going to be whoever is developing or providing or furnishing that affordable housing. Probably it might be better if that were to be rewarded to be encourage the maintenance of affordable housing units over time to ensure that they remain affordable. But the agency itself or the commission or the city is not going to be directly involved in that relationship. That's going to be between the provider that is providing that home, whether it's the trust or some other entity, and that future buyer, and what they accept in the resale formula that they do through the deed restriction. But the city itself and the commission is not going to be enforcing anything specific to that private arrangement.
The Affordable Housing Trust current model is not a land trust.
IHFA
They could not get support from IHFA to do a land trust because they attempted to do it somewhere in the state, and it wasn't very successful, so they discouraged the Moscow group from going the land trust route.
Correct, and the transaction I think they have on the home out in Eastman Acres, there is a first and a second, and there's a repayment or forgiveness of the second, but there is not a restriction on resale in that unit.
Okay.
Well, thanks for helping us with that.
Clarification.
And just to add to that, this action item is just for the commission to research these things that were kind of identified in the comp plan too, not bring those policies forward. So action item number 2 came from the zoning code, and this action item actually was in the previous analysis of impediments document. I'm sorry, not this one. I was mistaken. We have 2 from the zoning code. This one was to amend the non-conforming section of the zoning code to allow for reconstruction of a non-conforming structure as it existed prior to destruction. So currently in the code, non-conforming structures that are destroyed to an extent of more than 70% of the structure's value, they can only be rebuilt in conformance with the code. So this can result in challenges with financing and the provision of affordable housing. And then this one is the one that was in the analysis of impediments previously, and it was to amend the definition of daycare facility so that it no longer includes foster homes, because that subjects foster homes to zoning and location limitations, which may violate the Fair Housing Act.
I didn't even know that was in there.
And these are all research items, action items for the commission at this point.
Yes, and so they would bring a recommendation or the idea to planning and zoning and go through the channels for that. The fourth is regarding tax policies, and just the action would be to increase awareness of state of Idaho affordable housing tax credit programs, so the commission could create educational materials, work with the appropriate programs that are out there to create some educational materials and distribute those. Action 5 involves updating a survey that was referenced in the prior analysis of impediments document. In 2001, they did an extensive survey of private sector professionals, of realtors, housing providers, landlords, and the intent was to learn about how much do they know about the Fair Housing Act and how to ensure that they are providing services in accordance with it. And so that was in 2001, and there hasn't been an update since, so the commission felt it'd be nice to do that again and understand what training needs are needed in the community for those professionals, and then work to provide those trainings. And then 6 also involves training, and it just involves continuing the programs that we've been doing to promote educational opportunities for the housing providers, lenders, and realtors. So continuing our annual or sometimes biennial training sessions with Intermountain Fair Housing Council, and then the tenant landlord workshops. So those are the 6 action items. And then one of the final sections in the document is regarding fair housing enforcement. So I just wanted to give a little bit of information that I found. The Idaho Fair Housing Council, just for some background, was established in 1996, and they provide education and outreach, and then they research and investigate complaints that are received by citizens. And they refer complaints to HUD for further investigation and possible litigation. So some data that I received from them was from 2009 to 2015, there were 80 fair housing calls received from Moscow residents. 55 of those were jurisdictional cases, which means that they met the criteria to be in violation of the Fair Housing Act. And then 49 of those cases were regarding rental housing. Others were design and construction related or related to the sale or purchase of a home. And the issues of those cases revolved around majority of those were disability accommodations, and then others dealt with discrimination based on familial status, race, or national origin issues. So then, as I said, the 8 cases that come to Idaho Fair Housing Council are then referred to HUD if they need further investigation or assistance in mitigating. So from the state of Idaho, from just about the same time period, 2010 to 2015, there were 350 cases filed with HUD. 10 of those were from Moscow, so an average of 2 per year, or 2.8% of the cases. And 5 of those cases were regarding the failure to make reasonable accommodations for disability, and the other 5 were a mix of discrimination cases based on familial status, race, color, or discriminatory advertising. So there's, that's pretty good numbers for Moscow, but, there's always work to do to.
Well, if I may, it's interesting that you seem to have a lot better indication of fair housing problems in this data than you got from your survey. Your survey didn't find any.
Right.
And yet this is 1 per month from 2009 to 15.
1 per month.
You got 80 in 6 years.
Well, 6.5.
Right. But of those, so 55 were in violation of the act. So the other 35, if I can do math,
substantiated.
Right. They determined those aren't Fair Housing Act issues. Those are.
But you're getting 1 per month.
Yeah.
With something over a half a month actually having some merit.
Yeah, and it's just maybe the low survey return. There was only 155 people that responded to it.
The survey was bad.
Yeah.
I mean,
so
for whatever reason,
we didn't get this data.
It didn't provide anything, but this appears to.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a pretty good ratio myself. People like to complain, and so, if we're only getting a half a month of the valid ones, with any validity at all, I think that's pretty good.
And the other half of it is how many of these were resolved and how many actually had to go through.
Well, only 10 were sent on from the Intermountain Fair Housing. They were able to.
Even with that, how many of those were resolved without great pain and agony? Because maybe they just needed a ramp constructed over the front steps, and then the problem goes away. So, because that's the other half of it, you can file the cases, but then how many were successfully addressed and are no longer an issue?
And I think the majority were. They had that on the spreadsheet that they gave me. There was maybe a couple that were still being worked out.
Because that'd be handy-dandy to follow up.
Yeah.
Do you know if the 49 pertaining to rental were of the 55? Or
Yes.
Of the 80?
Of the 55.
Of the 55.
So just
So the bulk
6
of them
others.
are rental. And I don't know what our rental percentage is, but it's got to be high, being a university community, compared to a non-university community.
Yeah, that figure is in here someplace, that percentage of rentals.
And while we're still looking, could you wheel back to number 3 for just a second, action item 3?
Nope, must be 2 maybe, or 1, yeah, that one.
Non-conforming structures, because legal non-conforming has always seemed to be something that would indicate that when a structure goes away, that it be rebuilt in a legal conforming way for the zoning that's there. And how would this, giving an exception to legal non-conforming, would that just indicate that something gets to be perpetually grandfathered in forever and ever?
Sounds like.
And that's what it sounds like. So I see a conflict with our zoning laws and policies versus this particular action item.
Well, this action item would be to bring it forward to planning and zoning to make that code amendment.
Yeah, but would we really want to?
Well, that's what she said. That's what planning and zoning would get to make that determination of.
That's
That would
the
be the
commission's
discussion.
suggestion.
Yeah, that would be a big discussion.
It was mostly followed up in the realm of affordability. And I think that the mention came, maybe there was a duplex within a single-family zoning area at this point. So the affordability of housing was kind of the topic that came to this suggestion.
Another example would be, say you had an area that had been zoned R3, and so you had single-family residences, and they may have an apartment in it. And then it got zoned R2 later on down the road. Well, it still has the apartment, it's because it is grandfathered in unless something happens. And if there's a fire and there's a bit of destruction, then it's no longer grandfathered, that can no longer have the apartment. So then you lose that residence.
So that-
Right?
It's one that is a bigger discussion for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Good work, thank you.
Yeah, I just
A
had
lot of work, a lot of energy into this.
Just have one more slide.
one more slide for you.
Oh, you do?
Just to let you know what we've done for some public input. We did present the draft plan here in this room on November 5th for the Fair Housing Commission meeting. We didn't have any public in attendance, but we did announce that in the paper. And then we published a press release and had the public comment period held through the 4th of December with the full draft plan online. And so now here we are with City Council review.
Did anybody comment?
We received 2 comments, one from Mr. Steed and the second was from Nils Peterson.
From whom?
Nils Peterson.
And if I may, my comment were plural.
Yes,
And-
there were many.
And
How long is this going to take?
to compare this to the comments on the facility plan that I made that were not taken care of, Becky took care of everyone that I had, with one exception that I couldn't tell from the one in the packet here. Do we now have page numbers in the document?
You should. I did adjust them. I think it depends on the printer. Usually,
I couldn't tell from the iPad.
Oh, they should. Yes, I did adjust them. They should certainly be there.
Good.
Kudos to Becky for a great job of
Thank you.
Listening and following my scratchy notes and picking up some things that I think needed to be corrected. Thank you very much.
And she keeps us all in order as well, too. So.
Thanks.
This committee is going to recommend adoption of the analysis of impediments to fair housing and fair housing action plan. Do you gentlemen want to see this on the regular agenda, or is the consent agenda good enough?
I'd like to see it on the regular, just to keep the rest of the
I'd put it on the
council
regular to give the rest of the council members the
Okay.
opportunity to.
And we'll put it on the regular agenda.
Okay. Thank
All
you.
right, thank you.
Is there any other business to come before this committee? And this edition of the Public Works and Finance Committee is closed.